Sparkee with the big balls.
Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. Sparkee here. I've got my Sparkee dad hat on. Got those for sale on my website. If you guys want to pick one up, I'll put the link in the description below. So today I'm going to show you how to recreate Say So by Doja Cat. It's a pretty simple song, but we'll run through my project line by line. I'll show you exactly what I did. Hope you guys enjoy. Welcome to the inside of the project file. The very first thing I'm going to do is play the project. Play it all the way through, and then when that's done, I'll give you a brief overview of the actual layout of the project, and then I'll go into each track and show you what I did. So here we go. All right, cool. So I think that sounds pretty close to the original, actually. It's obviously not 100% because I recreated it from scratch in my little home studio. But it sounds pretty close, close enough that we're going to run through and see exactly what I did. So the very first thing you guys will notice is the way this is laid out over here. So all of these are called, I'm using Reaper, by the way. That's the DAW that I use. So in Reaper, all of these little indents are called folders. So let's look at drums, for example. So this is the drum folder. It would be also called a group in other DAWs. I've got a little subfolder in here for the snare and clap. So these are 3 layers. These 3 go to the snare layer, and then all of these go to the drum group. So they can be processed all as one entire group, which is, it's handy for processing, but it's also handy for laying out the project and seeing what it looks like. In terms of the colors I'm using, I never ever color code anything. I just did this for the video because I know there's going to be those crazy people on YouTube commenting that everything was gray. So I put the colors in for you guys. I hope you enjoy. The other unique thing I wanted to point out before we get into each track here is I've got a pre-master group. So you notice everything is indented off of that over here. The reason I do that is because I want to include other tracks sometimes in my project that I can solo as a reference track, and then all of those go directly to this actual master bus up here. So that's just an easy way for me to, check my mix. So for example, when I was recreating the original, which I have here, I'm not going to play that because YouTube will flag it and give me a copyright strike, but I would A/B that with my pre-master, and then that's how I recreated all the elements by ear, listening to it. So the very first one we'll jump into, me being a guitar player, it would make sense to start with the guitars. So I'm going to solo that, and we'll just listen to that one first. Okay, wicked. So all I did there was I recorded my Strat direct into my audio interface, but I have an external pedal called an HX Stomp, and I have like an amp modeler on there for a clean tone that I really like. It's my funky preset that I use. And I wanted to funk it up. Let's just hear it solo without the effects for a second. Oops. Here we go. Yeah, that sounds pretty dinky. So I wanted to make it really funky. So I added this phaser in Guitar Rig. So that just makes it, gives it that, it's not a wah sound, but it's a little bit of washing out that frequency content with, if you guys know how phasers work, I mean, you should be able to hear the sound there. I just boosted a little bit around, actually quite a bit, around 3K because I wanted that to poke out. I felt like that was sticking out in the original quite a bit. So I did that. Added some reverb to taste. This is just the stock preset for, the initial preset for this vintage verb here. And then I side chained it using LFO tool. Just a little bit, not too much, to the kick and snare. Just to help the kick and snare punch through the mix a bit. The next track is the bass. So this one, if you look at it, it's a little confusing. And it's totally overkill. I will admit what I did here is overkill for this project, but this is my bass template that I like to use. I'll just explain the weirdness first. So I've got this group here called bass, and I've got my layers in here. So this is just, I would consider fingers a real bass. It's not, though. It's a trillion. And then the sub is just a sub. So it's just another layer to fatten it up. So it sounds like this. You guys get the picture. And what I did there was I took this group, this folder, and I treated it. I didn't send it to the main parent group. I sent it individually to the bass high and bass low. The reason I did that is so they're frequency splitting, if you couldn't tell by the name. So this is the high frequency content, this is the low frequency content. And I sidechain them separately. The reason I do that is because I want the kick to punch through on the low end more than the high. So it obviously doesn't make any sense for this example because there's not a lot of high frequency content on this bass. But if I had something with like a slap on it with a lot of transient attack, I'd want that to cut through the mix as well. So I might even drag this up a little bit. So it's just, you can see what the side chain's doing there with the waveform. So for those of you who don't know, this is LFO tool, and I just use it actually for a bunch of different things, but mainly for side chaining. So if you don't know what side chaining is, you can look that up separately. But basically I'm ducking out the kick. So when the kick hits, it's silent and then ramps back up quickly. So it just helps it cut through the mix a little more. All right, pretty simple. But for what I did for the actual bass sound was I used Trillion. This preset just called Studio. Oh, you guys can't even see that. There we go. Called Studio Funk True Staccato. That's a preset I used. Ran it through a little bit of Radiator to give it some little bit of dirt. Then I used a bass amp, which would roll off some of that dirt, but you can still hear a little bit because it's just down a little bit in the mix, but it just kind of tightens it up. You know, and you can see the EQ here. So this is where most of the roll off is right there. This is just a preset called Fingered Bass Deep. And by itself, it just sounded like this. So then I added in the sub layer. This is, oh, here we go. This is Serum. So this is the sub preset that I like to use. I swear that was not a Corona cough. So this is just a sub layer that I like to use in Serum. It's pretty good. It just fattens up the mix. You can hear that. And then without it. It's subtle, but you feel it more than you hear it because I dropped it down like 15 dB almost. And the next thing we'll go over are the drums. So the drums are kind of a pretty straightforward disco groove. I made them as a combination of MIDI triggered samples as well as a sample of a drum loop that I chopped up from the Oliver sample pack. So here's what the drums sound like by themselves. So pretty straightforward. I mean, to help with the transition, we've got the crash. We've got the Mark Tree sample. If you guys don't know what that is, they're like wind chimes. I use that sample probably too much, I think in every single song. The way I like to trigger a lot of samples is using battery. So you see the crash here. That's the one that I thought sounded good. That wasn't in the original, by the way. I just threw that in because I wanted to. I just liked the sound of it. And if you can see all of these are just different samples that I like to audition as I'm running through the mix. I'll be like, you know, maybe that's not a good idea because that's kind of a reverse crash. But, you know, something like that. I might check these, how do they sound in the mix, and just click through them as the song's actually playing just to see what they sound like. And then I settled on that one. The Mark Tree, all I did a little bit of side chaining just to give it some movement. You honestly can't even hear that. So, and that's with a little bit of shimmer on there just to, you know, jazz it up a bit, I guess. I don't know. Sometimes I just experiment and I don't really have a reason why I do things, but I forgot about that, I guess. For the kick, I took it from an Oliver sample pack, a little loop, and it sounds like this. There's a little double kick here. Cool. That kick and the snare, actually this loop sounded very similar to the loop that was used in here. I'm not saying the original producer used it, but he used something that sounded very similar to it, because if we hear the drums, you guys can almost, if you've got a good ear, you can tell that those drums are really close to the original ones. So I'm using similar samples, which obviously helps it sound closer to the original. And in the snare group, I took that same Oliver loop, I chopped it up. And the reason I chop it up is because I like to control the levels separately and mix it myself and make it my own, because I took out the hi-hats as well and then just reorganized them. So I've got 3 separate layers here on the snare, the snare and clap. I've got the main one from the loop, which just sounds like this. No extra processing on that one. It's just a clap, little. You can see there's a little bit before the beat, which kind of helps it stick out in the mix as well. That's another little mixing tip I sometimes play around with. You just move the transients off of each other. It helps them stand out. This one is a MIDI triggered sample that I liked. Yeah, it's really punchy and kind of synthetic, right? And what do you know? It's also from the Oliver sample pack. Very good sample pack. And then on every other beat, well, no, not every other beat, but on the 4 of every bar, I've got this extra clap. Very subtle in the mix. It's not too loud. Yeah, but that adds a little bit of, and I bet you that's either Cashmere or Oliver. Where was that? Oh yeah, that's it there. So yeah, that just kind of livens it up a bit when you hear that. It's just not so constant, the drum beat. It adds some variety to it, which is also in the original. They added a clap. It wasn't exactly that sound, but it was very close to that. And I just added a little bit of hi-hat, you know, just on the offbeats there. So give it that disco feel. Cool. It's enough drums for now. So the synths. So here are the chords. I got the best results with 3 layers here. I was just kind of improvising. I did this all by ear. I don't know if these chords are exactly correct, but, well, I'm quite confident a few of these are correct by ear. But so the very first chord here, it's an E minor 7. Second one is some weird chord. I'm not sure the name of it. I could look it up, but then we've got D major 7. And then back to E minor 7. That weird chord again. D major 7. And this one. So that little tension. And then it releases on the B major. Sounds pretty cool. So I'll just solo those so you guys can see what that looks like. I mean, hear what that looks like. Hear what that sounds like, is what I meant. I think that sounds great, but with all 3 layers in there. You guys get the gist. And that first layer, okay, so I did something interesting with the EQ. If you guys can see that there, I just took out that kind of low mid-range, that's pretty much all mid-range of this preset I used 12 strings to. I just thought it sounded cool. It matched kind of the sound I was going for to try and recreate. I'm not exactly sure what synth they used. Could have been a combination of different ones. So on this other channel, I used Keyscapes. What did I use there? It's been a little while since I could. Oh, so I used this preset. I don't think I touched it at all. I think I just used all presets for this. So if you guys have Keyscapes, you guys could try this yourself. So that one sounds like this. Yeah, and that's just mostly the low end. I like the way the low end there sounded. Kind of thickened up the synths a bit. And this last layer, this is a preset I use a lot. I think it's a stock Serum preset, if I remember correctly. But it just kind of sounds cool. Very retro. And it layers nicely because the other ones kind of, they sustain, while this one just decays from the attack, right? As you can see right here. Just, and then with all of them together. So what I did with the synths in their parent group, or their folder, we'll call it, I did a little bit of, ooh, I called it, it's a smooth string preset. Look at that. Then I added some, well, actually the purpose of this is for a little bit of glue compression, just to tame it a bit. I mean, honestly, it probably doesn't do anything. I can't really hear the difference if I'm being completely honest. Added some reverb, can definitely hear that. This is just another preset, but I remember this one had like a 10-second decay on it, and that just sounded unnatural, so I turned that down a bit. Took away some of the bass. As you'll notice right here, there's quite a bit for some reason that I just wanted to get rid of, because that would add a DC offset to the master, which would cause, you know, problems going into a limiter or whatever. And I just sidechained it to the kick a little bit, not too aggressive. And yeah, so that is the project. If you guys have any questions, let me know. I'm happy to answer them. I just thought it would be cool to show you guys what the inside of one of my projects look like. So I'll play it through one more time at the end. Here you go.